Hey everyone, George here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some basics regarding discus fish. If you're a beginner and you're thinking about getting into keeping discus fish, and I don't mean a beginner in the hobby, because discus fish would certainly not be a fish that I would want anyone to try to start out with. They're a much more complicated fish than that. But if you're moving up and trying to have a more elegant fish and a larger centerpiece fish that you want to try, there's a lot of information out there regarding discus, but what I'm going to be teaching you today is some of the basics regarding how to get started, from tank size to water quality to water parameters to feeding to possible problems with your discus that you may have along the way, such as medical issues and so forth. And we're going to try to cover most of those areas and see if we can get you off to the right start and find out that you can actually do a good job of raising these fish without a lot of problems if you have a lot of the basics down and you've been doing this for a while. Now, the number one thing I want to talk about is tank size and the water quality. So we're going to cover those two areas first. I recommend that if you're looking to start out with a group of discus, that you start out with a group of 7 to 10 that you can raise in a 65 to 120 gallon tank. Now, that size of tank, of course, I wouldn't recommend anything less than 65 gallons for 7 discus fish, and all the way up to 120 if you're raising 10. Now, that does include the dither fish, such as good community fish that might go with them, such as tetras, which are very good. Black neons are fantastic with discus. Cardinal tetras, they're a good solid fish with discus as well. And one of my favorites is the rummy nose tetra. And all 3 of those tetras are tried and true with me, and I have not had any problems. As you can see in this particular video here, the discus are enjoying the company of the black neon. Now, when it comes to the amount of discus that you want, if you want between 7 and 10 fish, anything over 7, my recommendation would be that you get a 110 to 120 gallon tank, somewhere in there. I also want to talk a little bit about scaping your tank. The more simplistic your tank is for discus, the better off they are, and that includes substrate. If you're going to put substrate in your tanks, my recommendation is to use sand of some kind and put just a light dusting in there, and use the plants that are going to work well with the temperatures that they can handle, because discus do require a higher temperature, and that would be somewhere between 82 and 86 degrees. I know that some of my tanks are up to 89 degrees, but I'm encouraging breeding and those sorts of things. But you don't have to start out with a very complicated or sophisticated scape. As you can see in this picture, this is not very complicated, but it's beautiful at the same time. Now, the reason I like sand is because if you clean sand, you're going to lose a little bit of it every time you do some cleaning in here. And the nice thing about that is that over time you can just replace that sand and put another small dusting of sand on the bottom of your tank. The other opportunity that you might have is to be able to make a tank that has no substrate whatsoever, which would be just a simple bare bottom tank that is just the glass. Now, many people don't like this look because they find that it is not as attractive as having the contrast between your hardscape and the sand. But personally, I think if you're talking about the cleanliness of the tank, which is very important for discus fish, that you use a bare bottom tank to get your tank as clean as possible and get to places in the tank that might be hard to get to normally. And this makes this much easier, makes it easier to wipe out. Cleaning the glass and the sides of your tank and the bottom of your tank are always important, to wipe them down occasionally with a cloth, just to keep any of that diatom algae, that brown algae, from growing, which is inevitable. The other thing that I want to say is that if you are raising discus, do not put them in a tank that is not a well-seasoned tank. You need a tank that is a good 6 months old and has gone through the nitrogen cycle and all of your water parameters are in tip-top shape. You don't want to have any ammonia, you don't want to have any nitrites, and you have a bare minimum of nitrates in there. Now, when we talk about pH, I've gone through that in other videos. If you want to go back through my catalog of videos that I've put out in the past, you'll find that pH is something that people ask a lot about. pH is not as important as the stability of the pH. Stability of pH is much more important than the number itself. Now, discus fish enjoy a softer, more acidic water, 6.8, but I have found that hybrid discus, we're not talking about wild discus, but we're talking about hybrid discus that have been tank raised. It's all over the board as far as the pHs that you can keep these fish in. I recommend anything from 6.8 up to 8.2, and you'll do fine with these as long as that pH is stable. And that is the key to the whole thing, is making sure that pH is extremely stable and that you are able to make sure that that pH does not change, because over time this will create problems for your discus fish as far as the longevity of their life and so forth. So again, going over this, minimum 65-gallon tank with up to 110 to 120, and that would be 7 to 10 discus fish in a group. And I would suggest that you really stay with that scale because it's very important. As far as scaping, again, as simple a scape as you possibly can. Good plants for this are plants that you can stick between the rocks and the wood that don't need to be planted into the substrate, and that would be a nubius, any kind of fern type plants that will handle that kind of heat. There are many. Do your homework on that and make sure that your plants can handle the heat, and you will find that the basics of keeping plants in a warmer tank like that, there are plenty of plants out there that can handle that. And again, when you're decorating your tank and you're doing your scape, make it simple and elegant at the same time, giving your fish lots of room to swim around. Discus are very territorial, and there is going to be a pecking order, so it's very important that you understand that when you're putting your discus in this new tank, that there is going to be some battles that go on, and this can be minimized by having a larger group of fish and also having open areas where there is not a lot of places for them to hide and fight over. This is actually better for the fish that you do it that way, because there will be less aggression. Now, discus may pair off as they get older and want to spawn and raise young. When you see that happening, the only time that I would ever allow that to happen, unless you're just practicing raising some small discus fry with a pair that does not match, Then you would move those over into another tank, which would be a completely empty tank that is painted either blue or white on the inside so that the parents can be found once the fry hatch and are free swimmers. Once they're out of that wriggler stage and become free swimmers, it's important that they're able to find their parents, and that is something that you can resolve that problem by making sure the tank is painted on the inside either white or very light blue. Now, again, I'm not into breeding. I've tried breeding a little bit. In fact, I've got a pair that have bred right now. If you've been watching the last couple of months of my videos, I've been concentrating a lot on discus breeding and seeing how successful I could be at it. And we'll be doing a video update on that over the next couple of days, and I'll be putting that out there to give you an update on how those particular fish are doing. Getting back to your discus fish and what I recommend as far as taking care of discus fish, the very important water parameters that I talked about are very, something that you want to keep an eye on, but water cleanliness is probably the most important thing that you are going to be dealing with as you're raising discus fish. I would recommend that you do 30 to 50% water changes twice a week. When you're doing those 30 to 50% water changes, make sure that you're getting the return water into that tank as close to the temperature as you possibly can, because discus are very sensitive to temperature changes. And again, twice a week, 30 to 50% twice a week is going to be absolutely fantastic. Make sure that you have good filtration, something that has a good turnover ratio for the size of tank that you have, and make sure that you are, again, cleaning the walls of the tank down on the inside and also the bottom of the tank if you have no substrate and you're going with a bare bottom tank. As far as food goes, I don't like to give live food to discus. I do dabble in some frozen blackworms and some bloodworms occasionally. I don't like to give bloodworms because there is no guarantee, even though the package may say that they're parasite free, there is no guarantee that that is going to be something that is actually factual. And the last thing you want is for your fish to get internal parasites. They will start to show that if they do have an internal parasite, they will get thin. You'll start to see their heads look a little pinched in, and as much as they eat and they gain no weight at all, this means that they've got some kind of onboard parasite that's internal and causing them problems, and that is something that you have to pay attention to. So you can give some frozen foods out there. There are discus mixes out there in the frozen food section at your pet store. Also, you want to pick out a very good flake, because this is going to be the staple in their diet, as well as pellets. Pellets and flake are going to be the two most important foods that you feed your fish, as well as a beef heart mix. If you can make it yourself, that's fantastic. If you can't, you can buy a beef heart feed. Sometimes, depending on if your store is someone who carries discus and you're able to get them. Big box stores are not going to have things like that, so make sure you're getting your beef heart from a mom and pop store that focuses on discus and other types of larger fish, and the beef heart will be something that they will likely carry a brand of some. If you would like to get beef heart recipes, let me know and I will get one for you. Just leave it in the comments down below. But again, it's important to feed a wide variety of foods, because it's important that discus get those things that make them healthy. And getting food, like I said, that is a wide variety of foods is so important, and feeding them a wide variety of foods. You don't want to get them stuck on something in case you can't get it, especially blackworms, California blackworms, or anything like that. If you're relying on those types of live feed to your fish, you're going to create some problems for yourself down the road, especially where you run into problems where somebody may not have blackworms and there may be a shortage of them. That happened during the COVID pandemic, and a lot of people were trying to get me to find out where they could get blackworms at, and they just were not available. That's why I don't feed a steady diet of blackworms to my fish, even though they're very healthy and they do stimulate spawning and that sort of thing and breeding. It's something that you probably want to stay away from. Now, one of the other things that I want to talk about is lighting in your tank. Discus fish do not need specifically harsh lighting in the tanks. In fact, they kind of like their light a little bit lower, and you don't need anything really sophisticated that is expensive. You can get away with a lot of different kinds of lighting. They rely on the blue light and the white light mostly, and the plants in your tank, if you're doing the kinds of scape that you're seeing, for example, in this particular part of my video, you can see that there's a lot of anubias, there's Java fern, and a few other types of plants in here, and those types of plants are low light plants and do not require a lot of light. If you're going to do a more sophisticated tank, then this video is not for you. You probably want to go on and research a little bit more. I want to thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions regarding raising discus, I want you to understand that the myth around discus that they're hard to raise and or impossible to raise and whatever, they're really not. They're a little bit more difficult than other fish in the sense that their water needs to be cleaner. But if you have good habits with all of your tanks of keeping your water clean and so forth, like I said, a couple of water changes a week, between 30 and 50% twice a week, is going to be just fine. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that everyone had a great Thanksgiving holiday. We've got some great videos coming up here. We're going to be doing a video on scaping tanks. I'm going to give you 3 different kinds of scapes. It's probably going to be a longer video. Stay tuned for that. And we'll also get you an update on these fry that I've been raising. Anyways, thank you so much. Leave your comments down below. Give me that thumbs up, like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. That's how we build the channel. Again, thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one.